I think for values, something that's really helpful is to have like words like integrity that come to mind, all those kinds of things that you are just these kind of one words, but then change them into a statement, really a short sentence that's really actionable
Right.
advice. If I had to phrase it, it's just, you're saying, if you were going to give advice to somebody really quick and short, that's what the value should be. I think a really good example of this is the Buffer culture deck. Buffer is a um, social media company that's fairly large, and they put their values online back in 2014. I think they did a really good job of making them actionable advice. And so they have 10. My opinion, 10 is too much. I would do like 3 if possible. And a good way to do that, if you have too many, is to have like principles as your values. So you have 3 principles, and then underneath those principles, you might have 3 values. So everybody can remember the principles. Maybe they don't remember the values, but they can reference them. But everybody knows the principles. So I'm going to read Buffer's 10 really fast.
Sure.
Number 1, always choose positivity and happiness. That's a value. 2, default to transparency. Just be honest. That's another way of saying we're honest. Default to transparency. Have a focus on self-improvement. It's kind of like accountability, like you were saying, and
Yep.
wanting to have that personal progress. Number 4, be a no ego doer, right? So we're humble. Rather than saying humility, we're saying be a no ego doer. Number 5, listen first, then listen more. Really good way of saying that we listen to our customers. Right. We listen to each other. Have a bias towards clarity. I'm sorry. Have a bias towards clarity. So you're always trying to make sure that you understand what's going on, and that you're also communicating clearly. Make time to reflect. Don't just sit in the hamster wheel all day. Take time to reflect on what's working, what's not, what's profitable, what's not. Number 8, live smarter, not harder. Right? Do the job well, but don't burn yourself out. Number 9, show gratitude. Number 10, do the right thing, which is basically integrity there as well. Right. Do the right thing. So when you have it like that, it's easier to remember, but it's also much easier to share with people and have them understand it. If I am meeting with a potential employee and interviewing them, and I ask them, tell me about a moment that you had integrity. Like, well, that's really, I don't know, that's hard to say. But if I say, hey, tell me a time where you did the right thing, now it's a much easier conversation.
Or you could even go more specific than that and say, tell me about a time somebody offered you the opportunity to do a side job.
Yep.
At your last job.
Yep.
And you don't even follow that up by saying, and what did you do? You just say, tell me about it. And yeah, you get more specific. And that's the problem with platitudes. You described them as invisible words, quality, satisfaction guaranteed, things like that. They're all meaningful, but we see them so often that they don't show up. They're invisible, as you say. And then we all have our own ideas about what quality is and what satisfaction is. But if you're more specific, like I can't remember the name of the company, you just
Buffer,
like it creates clarity. One thing that I put in my suggested culture statement values, one is respect. And what does that mean? I said, well, I meet every person with a presumption of respect. I seek first to understand, then to be understood, which is Brian or Stephen Covey. My language and my behavior demonstrate my respect. In other words, I have manners, right? I do not make negative comments about people ever, right? You can have one on God. So those are the kinds of things that you can put into culture, at least in one of the sub bullets, and go over with people. And like you said, have them give an example where somebody contravened that or where they modeled that. So, but you have to have a written culture statement. And it's more than just something you hand to people who already work for you and say, oh, this is what we think now. It is your guide when you begin to hire people. You look for those values in people that you hire. And nothing will blow up a company. Matter of fact, I think more than cash shortages, that the biggest exploder of companies is culture clashes. It really is, either amongst the partners or the co-owners who have different values and different goals and different vision and mission, and with people that they bring in who blow the thing up.
Yeah.
And so if you have written cultures and you are looking for them when you're hiring, that old saying, you hire for skill, fire for attitude, you can test skills because if a guy can run a skid steer or not, you can see that. It's harder to look for values, but it can be done. And the values are the things that you usually wind up parting ways with people for.
Yeah. Well, and again, like if you think about it as a pyramid, the vision's up top, the values and the culture have to support the vision and the mission.
Yep.
They have to be inclusive of that. And so as you're creating those values, make sure that you're thinking about the vision overall and not just what sounds nice on a piece of paper, right? Or what seems good. I think that with culture, it's one of the things that you have to monitor consistently. And if you see people that aren't living up to the values, I mean, it just takes one person to bring a culture down, in my opinion.
Right.
And if you don't fix it, you got a problem on your hands. So how you respond to people going against the culture and going against the values is sometimes even more important than just living the values yourself. Because if you're going to tolerate people that are players on your team that don't represent what you're trying to achieve, that says a lot to your team about how what you're willing to put up with, and that you don't really value or prioritize the culture.
Well, Christine Sexter, who we had on a year ago, I think, but she makes a statement that nothing will ruin a good employee faster than them watching you tolerate a bad one.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And we don't like to fire people, as we can complain how hard it is to find people to replace them. And all those things are true, but you have to do it. But you have to have a standard against which you're measuring them and saying, this is what's going wrong here.
Yeah.
And if you can't correct it. And the thing about values, when you bring people into a company, is people tend to have values. They don't necessarily just change them. If you bring a guy in who values his personal financial well-being more than he values his family, that's who he is, it's really hard to get them to change. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's hard to get them to change to where they value their family more than their personal finances, presuming that that's the correct thing. In my opinion, it is. So you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to be willing to make adjustments. And that requires that you have a known culture statement that people buy into and agree with.